All right, good morning. Our learning is Leila Nishmas Mindel, Mariam Bas Kalma Reuven. Her Shama should have an aliyah. We're in Kuf Chav Ches Amud Beis. I don't think we've ever wrapped up the discussion about exertion on Shabbos, exercise on Shabbos. Never talked about that. It was just like a teaser. It was like completely rude. Okay, we'll get there. Today, if I don't remind me, and I'm also going to talk about pets, what a person is allowed to do, not allowed to do with pets, touch them, move them, all that stuff, all going to be discussed today. So, Kofinis Asal. So the Mishnah on top of Kuf Chav Ches Amud Beis, Kofinis Asal Lifnei Afrochim. A person's allowed to invert a basket in front of chicks, Akadeshi Yalu V'Yerdus, so they could climb up and down from their nests. Okay, so what's the novelty over here? The novelty is that chicks are muksa. As we'll see from all the discussions we're going to have over here, that animals in general are muksa. And therefore, typically we do not move something for something else that's muksa. We do not, right, you're not allowed to move another item to enhance or help something that's muksa. So putting a basket in front of the chicks is going to be moved for the sake of something that's muksa. And we saw, okay, so bottom line is that's the novelty. The novelty over here is that you would have thought, let me say it better. There's two opinions. One opinion says that you are not allowed to move things for the sake of muksa, and therefore this Mishnah is interpreted, if you recall, we saw this way back when, that the chicks are in some level of distress, the chicks that you're moving the basket initially for something permitted, and therefore you're allowed to ultimately place it in front of the chicks, and the chicks are going to use it. There's another Morah that holds that you are allowed to move things for something that's muksa, and therefore this Mishnah we understand the novelty of this Mishnah, teaching us that even though the chicks are muksa, you're allowed to place a basket in front of them so they could reach their nest, even though you're moving something which is not muksa for the sake of something that's muksa. Okay, Tarnagola Shabarcha. Let's say a hen escapes from its pen. You can't fully pick it up because it's muksa, but there is a leniency in the sense that you're allowed to push it until she enters back into where she needs to be. You're allowed to help calves and young donkeys walk. Now you'll notice there's a difference between the terminology. When it comes to the hen, you're allowed to push it. When it comes to the calves and young donkeys, you're allowed to help them walk. That means you're allowed to hold them by the side to help them walk. So we have to understand why it is by the hen that we're not able to also help it walk. Like you would imagine you could hold the wings, whatever it is, and let it walk, but you can't do that. By the hen, you have to push it. By the other animals, you're allowed to hold it by the side. So we'll have to see why we're more stringent by a hen. Okay, Isha medada esbena. Now, a woman's allowed to help her young child walk. Now, that obviously, a young child is not muksa. So what's the novelty of this statement? The point, this statement is understood to be a reference to a child who is in Rishus Harabim, and the child is not walking back. So you're allowed to, the parent is allowed to kind of hold its hand, hold the infant, the toddler's hands to help the child walk. Okay, and then we'll see a limitation on this. Rabbi Yehuda, Amasai, when is this so? Bismanshu notel achas umeniach achas. When the child is old enough that they're able to walk a little bit, they're able to lift one foot and put the other foot down. But if the child is so young that the only, or simply the child is just unwilling, and the only way to move the child is to drag the child, usher, that's not allowed. Okay, so obviously the child's in danger, it's one thing, but if you have a child who's not able to really walk, it's not a good idea to go somewhere with a child who can't really walk in a place without an Eruv, because you're going to be stuck where you're going to have to drag the child, or you have a child who simply is you have a concern the child is going to stop walking, and to drag a child through the public domain is a form of carrying, and therefore it cannot be done. What you are allowed to do is hold on to the child's hands, kind of move the child a little bit, but that's only if they're able to be walking on their own. Okay, Amrav Yehuda Amarav. An animal falls into a stream of water and it's unable to move out of it. So again, an animal is muksa. So what are you allowed to do? Maybe also you're allowed to put pillows and cushions under the animal, and then if it goes onto those pillows and cushions to kind of get out of it, then it's allowed. But if she's unable to, then you got to leave her there. Meisvei, however, this is a challenge from another brisa. Brisa says "Behemish nafla amasamayim osela parnasa bimkoma." What you are allowed to do is to give it food in her present location. Okay, b'shvil shlotamas, in order to prevent the animal from dying. Parnasa in. The implication of this brisa is you're allowed to provide provisions. You're allowed to give the animal food. Karmel chasasim lo. Chasas is low, but you're not allowed to do more than that. You can't even go ahead and put out pillows and cushions. So Gemara says lokasha hada efshar b'farnasa, when it's able to survive by sitting there in the stream. In other words, it's not going to get swept away and die, and it's able to just be there. Okay, it's sitting in the water. It's unable to move, so whatever, but it's going to just rest there in the water, and you're able to feed it. Then that's fine. Hadi efshar b'farnasa. parnasa. But the ruling of Rav is in a situation where it's unable to survive by simply feeding it over there. So there, efshar parnasa in vilo. So if it's possible to again give provisions, then that's fine. But if not, maybe karmach sasos meniach tachteha, then you're allowed to put pillows and cushions, and the animal will climb out on its own. Ask the Gemara v'hakamavata kli mechano. By placing those pillows and cushions under the animal, then this utensil is no longer going to be able to be used. Why not? Because there's a concern that the animal is going to start climbing up, and then it's going to rest on the cushions, and now these cushions are no longer able to be used on Shabbos. So So Rav holds that nullifying the preparedness of utensil is something which is only rabbinically prohibited. In other words, even though it's true, this utensil is now no longer going to be able to be used on Shabbos, but that is a rabbinic prohibition. Tsar Baalei Chaim D'Oraisa. Our concern for animals being in distress is a biblical mitzvah. And therefore the biblical concern for the animal, Tsar Baalei Chaim D'Oraisa, overrides the rabbinic prohibition against nullifying the item's preparedness for use. Okay, fine. Let's go a little further. Tarnagola Shabarcha. Again, a hen escaped, you're allowed to push her. Dochen in, you're allowed to push it. Medadin in low, but you're not allowed to help the animal walk. Tanina lahad tan rabbanan, and this is supported by that said explicitly in a brisa. Medad mehem achayva of bechatzer avaloas tarnagolas. You're allowed to help an animal, beast or bird, walk in a courtyard. In other words, you're allowed to hold their hands as they walk in a courtyard, but a hen, you're not allowed to hold its wings. Tarnagolas, my time alone. Why is it that you can't help a hen walk? Because a hen, when you hold on to the wings of a hen, it's very light, and whatever the nature of a hen is that it oftentimes lifts itself up off the ground, and then you're actually lifting it up, and that's too much. And therefore, when it comes to another animal, a donkey, it's not going to go fly, right? You could hold on to its sides, and you could help it, but a hen, you're going to really be lifting it up, and therefore you're not allowed to do so. Okay, two brises that relate to this. Tanya Chada, one brisa says, You're allowed to help an animal, a beast, a bird, walk in a courtyard, but not in a full-fledged public domain. A woman is allowed to help her child walk even in a public domain, and certainly in a courtyard. So again, a child is stuck in the public domain. A parent is allowed to go ahead and help the child walk to get the child out of the public domain. We have another brisa. We're not allowed to lift up an animal, beast, or bird completely off the ground in a courtyard. You're allowed to push them so that they enter their enclosure. Now, the second brisa is going to be analyzed because it says you're not allowed to lift an animal up. So let's see, the Gemara is, it says you're not allowed to lift it up, but it says you are allowed to push them. Okay, so let's see the Gemara's analysis. Hagufa kasha. Okay, the second brisa is contradictory. Amras in okrin. On the one hand, you say in the brisa you're not allowed to lift the animal up off the ground. Okay, which implies that what? If you're not allowed to lift it up, the implication is you're allowed to do what's less than that, which is to help them walk. Okay, dochen in midad and low. Hadar amras, but then you say in the next line, dochen in midad and low. The next line of the brisa says you're allowed to push the animal, but not help them walk. Right? So the first part of the brisa implies you're allowed to help them walk. The second part of the brisa says you're only allowed to push them. So what's going on? Amrabai, no problem. Seifa asan latarnagolis. The latter part of the brisa is talking about a hen. Okay, and a hen, as we saw earlier, you're not allowed to help them walk because the fact that they'll fly if you help them, and therefore it is usher. Rabaye, now we just go on a tangent. Haiman deshachit tarnagolis, person slaughtering a rooster, lachbeshinu lekari ba'ara, press its legs to the ground, inami nedel hu medel, or lift the legs entirely off the ground, didilma manach lulatufre ba'ara, because if you're not manipulating the legs, there's a concern that it's going to stretch out its claw, okay, and attempt to pull away. V'akarlu l'simanim, and it's going to dislodge the pipes from its connectedness to the jaw, and therefore invalidate the shechita. Okay, this is just a tangent how to slaughter a hen or a rooster properly. You want to hold on to its legs so it doesn't move around too much, and therefore dislodge one of its pipes, and therefore that would cause the animal to be invalid. Okay, so let's talk about. So basically, what we've seen come out of this entire discussion is that moving animals typically is going to be muksa. There are certain dispensations. If it runs away, you're allowed to help it, this and that. But other than, Tsar Baalei Chaim, other than helping it, moving animals is muksa. And that is the way that most poskim assumed that all animals are muksa. How do people have pets? They're all No. Okay. What's it called? So I didn't finish the sentence there. What's it called? But so it's a major discussion among the poskim, and there are those who are makel. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is makel. He says that when a person designates an animal as a pet, then it loses its status of muksa. Right? Just the same way I could designate a rock as a non-muksa item, I should be able to designate a pet as a non-muksa item. Not all the poskim agree to this. There's major controversy around what Moshe Feinstein's psak is around this. Many people quote him favorably, but this is one of the controversies. There was a final volume on Ramosha's Chuvas, which came out much later than the other ones, and there's a lot of discussion about were they all completely written by him, were they written by his son-in-law, Rabbi Tendler? Major discussion in Hak. So Ramosha, some say he held was usher, some say he held was mutter. Bottom line is there's what to rely upon. There's what to rely upon. There's what to rely upon to have a pet and to move a pet. Certainly to walk a pet, everyone would agree is not usher. In other words, you're just attaching the leash and then letting the animal walk. That's not moving the pet. The pet is essentially moving itself. But to go ahead and to sit there and to pet an animal, again, many poskim, I would say the majority of poskim say problematic. Shlomo Zalman and some other, mostly Sephardic poskim say it's mutter if if it's designated as a pet. If you could avoid it, I would avoid it. I wouldn't just stomp pet a pet. If you have an animal, if your animal is going to need its petting, in other words, if part of an animal's well-being is having its owner pet it. So if your person is going to ignore their own animal that they own, that's going to cause the animal to suffer, and therefore that's certainly allowed. And the poskim say, for those who do pet an animal, even if it's not their own animal, you don't have to tell them to stop because it's what to rely upon. If you could avoid it, I would avoid it. Okay, so the bottom line is, if you own a pet, there's certainly what to rely upon to take care of your own pet, and it needs petting, and just like a child needs holding, a pet needs some petting, that's permitted. If it's your friend's pet, and you don't really need to pet it, I would advise not, but there certainly is what to rely upon to go ahead and pet it. Again, as indicated from this whole discussion over here and elsewhere, that typically an animal is not something which is used on Shabbos, but again, there's certainly what to rely upon. Okay.
Nowadays, a support animal is
Sorry?
Nowadays, it's a support
Every animal is a support animal. Okay? Yeah, certainly. No, but for real. In other words, if a person needs it for their own well-being, then 100% it's mutter. Not only for their own well-being, if it's for the animal's well-being, it's permitted. Because of Tzar B'Alei you'd be allowed to pet it, right? So that's certainly okay. We're talking about a case where, so again, if a person already has a pet and whatever it is they need it, fine. I'm talking like a dog. In other words, if you have like a gerbil, and you don't need to take it out of your cage every day, don't take it out of your cage on Shabbos. Don't get a gerbil. What's it called? Don't take it out of your cage on Shabbos. That's obvious. But I'm saying, if you have a dog or whatever, and you need and it needs petting, allowed. If the child, if it's whatever, and there's what to rely upon to pet it. If it's your friend's pet and it's just there, avoid petting it on Shabbos. I think that's probably the smartest thing to do. Yes.
There was a problem carrying the child on Shabbos. Rob or one of them said that the child kind of helps straighten himself out.
Carry itself as well. Okay, there's certain dispensations when a child is in need to carry it. But over here again, we're talking about a case where the child's not able to carry itself. You're dragging it, so you're talking about like a very young toddler. You're gonna drag it on the ground. That's gonna be usher. Okay. Imi yalvnas behema b'yom tov. Okay, you are not allowed to deliver an animal of its young on Yom Tov. Okay, why you're not allowed to help an animal? Why you're not aval misan? You're not allowed to help it. We'll see exactly the definition of delivering versus helping. But why you're not allowed to help? Why you're not allowed to deliver an animal's baby on Yom Tov? So here, once again, the Chachamim, this really connects to our earlier Mishnayos in the sense that it is considered extra exertion, which we said is usher. So let's define. So I skipped this. Let's go back to it. What are the parameters of extra exertion? So it's not so well defined. We saw very particular examples of taking boxfuls of grain. So the poskim say, there are two things we'll mention now. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about this, but exertion for no reason is going to be usher. So for a person to go ahead and say, I'm home on Shabbos and I want to rearrange my furniture today, usher. It should not be done. Most assume that that's under Udu D'Chol. If you have guests coming or whatever, and you want to rearrange things because, they're going to be guests, and therefore I need to have couches over here and the table over here, that's 100% mutter. That's not for no reason. But if it's done for no reason, then the poskim say it's prohibited. Okay, let's talk about exercise briefly, even though whatever, but it's part of that same discussion. So if a person is doing exercise that is going to be sweat-inducing, then the poskim say that should not be done. So a person doing like a proper workout, like running, and even though there's an argument to be made, and some push back because, hey, at the end of the day, I'm enjoying this, right? I go for a run because I enjoy it. I'm not doing it for any other, it's something I don't, it feels good. It feels good. Many poskim say to go for a run, which is going to induce sweat, should not be done. If a person has like some lighter exercises, stretches, whatever, exercises that do not bring a person to seriously sweating, many poskim say, again, if it's being done for your own enjoyment, then it's permitted. So a person who has like their stretches or light exercise, a few push-ups, whatever it is, then to do those would be, according to many poskim, would be okay. But to do it to a point where a person, even, there's discussion about lifting weights, but certainly things without any tools or whatever, without any equipment, just to do some light exercise around, at home is there's certainly what to rely upon to do. Where it gets more complicated is if a person has to do it. Then we get into, it's PTO, things which are for therapeutic purposes. We had an earlier discussion. You can't do things which are for therapeutic purposes. So again, it's a little counterintuitive. If you absolutely need, again, we have that continuum. If you absolutely need it, okay, then you're going to be in major pain or whatever it is. Fine. If you're healthy and you're doing it for just enjoyment, okay. If it's like, okay, it's it would be beneficial, but I'm doing it for therapeutic purposes, that's already when you enter that trickier territory. So again, light exercise for a person who's healthy and they're just doing it for their enjoyment, mutter, as long as it's not like sweat-inducing. A person is like in major pain and recovery, whatever it is, also mutter in that middle stage where it gets a little tricky. Okay, not comprehensive, but enough. Okay, fine. You're allowed to deliver, and we're going to have a long discussion about this for the next little while, delivering a woman of her child on Shabbos, okay? So a woman is in labor or leading up to labor, you're allowed to help her. The assumption is that there is some risk to life, and therefore everything is allowed. You're allowed to summon a midwife from one place to another, even from a distant place. The poskim point out that means even if it's a midwife that is, let's say you have a doctor, that's close by, or a midwife that's close by, or a doula that's close by, but it's not her favorite one. It's not the one that she wants. She has one that lives in Philadelphia. Also mutter. You're allowed to get the one that, even if you mean more Chil Shabbos, it's not Chil Shabbos, it's what she needs, and therefore you're allowed to do. So you don't have to go to the doctor you don't like, you don't have to go to the hospital you don't like, you don't have to go to the person you don't like, you're allowed to do whatever is needed so that the person is comfortable, okay? Mechalana is a Shabbos, and you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos. We'll see what that line is coming to include. V'koshen is a tibor, you're allowed to tie the umbilical cord of the newborn. Okay, Rav Yossi, Rav Yossi says you're allowed to cut it off as well, not just tie it, and that's the way we paskin. The chol tzorche mila osam Shabbos, you're allowed to do all the requirements of bris milah on Shabbos. If bris falls out on Shabbos, you're allowed to do all the requirements. We'll see exactly what that includes as well. Okay, ask the Gemara first. Let's talk about animals. Kesam misanten. How do you assist the animal in its delivery? Rav Yehuda Omer oches es avalat shel yipol aretz. When the child comes out, when the animal, comes out of the womb, you're allowed to catch it. That's what it means. Okay, Rav Nachman Amar dochik babasar kadesh yitzav. Rav Nachman is more makel. He says you're allowed to push the flesh so that the fetus should emerge. Okay, so again, you can't do too much, but you can do something. So one says you're just allowed to catch it, which is almost nothing. The other one says you're allowed to push the flesh so that the fetus is going to come out. Okay, Tani Kavas Yehuda, we have a brisa which supports the first view. Ketzam Esadan, how do you help? Ochilsan as an avalat shel aretz, you grasp the newborn so it doesn't fall onto the ground. V'nofeach lo bechotmo, and you're allowed to blow into the nostril of the newborn to clear it of mucus, right? The child is oftentimes, it's surrounded by mucus, and sometimes mucus can get stuck in the nostrils. You're allowed to blow through the nostrils to clear the mucus. And you're allowed to place the mother's teat into its mouth so that it should suckle, okay, to help it, and that's all helping the child. That's allowed. We used to endear a kosher species of animal to its newborn on Yom Tov. Okay, so what does this mean? What this means is that sometimes a mother will not care for a mother animal will not care for its child, and that could be very detrimental to the child. If the child doesn't have the care that it needs, it's going to die. It needs its mother to care for it. And sometimes you have scenarios where the mother, for whatever reason, isn't caring for the child. So you're allowed to do certain things, which we'll see in a moment, to ensure that the mother cares for the child. Okay, what are those things? Amar Abaye. Okay, Abaye says maybe bul shel melech. You place a fist-sized lump of salt. You place it on the mother's womb. Okay, this is obviously very painful. Apparently, what happens is that the pain caused to the mother animal reminds it of the fact that it just gave birth, and it actually triggers pity for the newborn. Okay, I'm not, fine. Alternatively, what you could do is dash the water of the afterbirth on the infant animal, the newborn animal, so that the mother animal smells its scent and has pity on the newborn. Okay, so apparently these were tricks that were done to ensure that the mother animal cares for its young. Okay, v'davka tahora, and as you saw, Rav Shimon Leal said specifically a pure animal. Aval tamei lo, an impure animal, no, not. Why? My time tamei lo merach Vimerachka Valda. Apparently, non-kosher species do not generally reject the offspring that they bore. Vimerachka Valda, and if an animal would do so, if a non-kosher animal species does reject the offspring, lo makarva, no matter what you do, it will not re-accept it. Okay, so I didn't get around to looking into like what common practice is, but apparently there's a distinction, different types of species. Apparently kosher animals are more prone to reject their species, and therefore it was more common for them to have to go ahead and do something to ensure that it has compassion on it, whereas non-kosher animals typically they do not reject their species, but if they do, it's all over, and therefore there's no point in doing any of that on Shabbos. Okay, now let's get back to human beings. Miyaldan es isha, you're allowed to deliver a woman of her child, okay? Michli, Tana le miyaldan es isha, v'karon lachacham makom makom, so it says you're allowed to do whatever you need to deliver the child, and then it says you're allowed to go not only for her but also the midwife, and included in the midwife, by the way, is anyone who's going to support her, even if they're not like so. My son Shlomo was born on Shabbos. I don't know the first thing about giving birth, even though I went to like one or two of those like silly classes and learned how to breathe and whatever. And bottom line is that nonetheless I was allowed to be Michal Shabbos, whether I went in I happened to go in the taxi for Uber days, with my wife, but even if I missed it, I would have been able to go on my own because I was simply supportive. So even though I'm not, so when it says midwife, it's not only someone who's like a professional, even if it's just someone who will be supportive. Obviously, there's a limit. 10 people be very supportive. We don't do that, right? 1, 2, people who are really needed are able to go along. Okay. Then, but the Mishnah concluded by saying Mechalan es Shabbos. It said you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos. What does that come to include? We just had a whole long list of things which are Chil Shabbos. So of course you could do anything. What does that last line come to include? Let's see how to turn our abundance to include the following. Fascinating. Listen, if she needs a lamp, her friend's allowed to light a lamp. If she needs oil, her friend brings her oil, carrying it in the palm of her hand. That's obviously not the normal way. We're talking about in a public domain, right? Which carrying is aser midoraisa, but she ideally should carry it in her hands, which is obviously not the normal way you carry oil. And if her hand is insufficient to bring the amount of oil that's needed, she brings it in her hair. And if it's not sufficient to bring it in her hair, she brings it in a container, just carries it in the normal fashion. Okay, so let's first analyze the first part. Amar Mar, Pshita. It's obvious that her friend's allowed to light a candle for her if she needs it. So tzricha besuma. We're even talking about a blind woman. A blind woman, you're allowed to light a candle for a blind woman. Ma'adatema kevan delochazia aser. Since it's not, she can't see. What's the point? Kamash malan asuve miyatva daita. Very important words. Asuve miyatva daita, because her mind is put at ease. Savri ikamidi. She assumes that if there's a light lit, that if something's going to be needed for my well-being, chazia chaverta avtli, my friend will be able to see better and be able to do it for me, and that's enough. So the bottom line is anything done to calm her down. This is a very important principle in general for someone who's ill, that anything that's going to, someone who is seriously ill, you're allowed to do things which will calm them down. It's not really going to help. So what? You're allowed to do things that you need music put on, you put on the music. You need a light for a blind person, you put on the light, right? And we're talking about not just flicking a light Durabana nowadays, we're talking about lighting a candle, all that's going to be permitted. Okay. It says the Mishnah further, the Brisa, she needed oil. So we said if you can't fit it in the hands, put it in the hair. Ask the Gemara, fine. By saying putting in the hair, the implication was that it's not as usher, and the focus was on the carrying. But the Gemara asks, there's schita. You put oil in the hair, then you're going to squeeze it out. Isn't there schita over there, right? So for those of you who want to take showers on Yom Tov, right? So one of the things we speak about is you can put shampoo in your hair when it's dry, but you can't squeeze it out of your hair. That's schita, right? You're squeezing things out of your hair. So Rabbi Yosef Dharma Tarvayu ain't schita b'seir. There's an opinion that says there's no squeezing, at least biblically, there's no squeezing in hair. We do paskin, there's squeezing in hair. Okay, Rav Ashi Amar afilu tema yesh schita b'seir. Even if you want to say there is squeezing out by hair, mevia la bechli derech sa'ara. It doesn't mean that you actually go ahead and you put the oil in the hair, then when you get there, you squeeze it out of your hair. What it means is, imagine you had like those old like dudes from the 50s, like a big, what are they called? Up to? Somebody? Who knows? Whatever. The bees. The beehive. There we go. And you stick it in the beehive, right? The beehive's there, and you stick the container in it to come because as much as we're able to deviate, we deviate, right? So if she can hold the oil in her hand, that's very strange. We do that. If she can't do that, so before we go ahead and carry in a container, which if you need to, we would try to stick the container in the hair, in the beehive, let's say, and that would allow her to carry in an abnormal fashion. Have a great day.